Welcome, everybody, at your screens, wherever you may be around the globe. Welcome to this panel titled No One is Safe Until Everyone is Safe, Strategies and Challenges to Achieve a Global Vaccine Strategy. This session is organized by the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, a think tank, education and research center associated with the German Social Democratic Party. And in the next half an hour, we will discuss how the world could produce more COVID vaccine and distribute it more fairly. To discuss this question, I'm happy to welcome two distinguished guests. The first is José Manuel Barroso. You are probably familiar with him and his face. He's a former Prime Minister of Portugal. He has served as the 11th President of the European Commission, and he's currently a non-executive chairman at Goldman Sachs International. But which is, of course, most relevant to us and to our discussion today. He's the board chair of the Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, a global public-private health partnership with the goal of immunizations for all. It was set up with the help of the Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation. And Gavi also co-leads the COVAX initiative's dose sharing program. So he's an expert, and we are very glad to have him here and speak about the distribution of COVID vaccines. I'm also very happy to welcome Stefano Vella. He started out as a medical researcher specializing in infectious diseases. He has held different positions with the National Institute for Health in Italy, amongst others heading the pharmacology department. So he's an expert for the market too. He's currently an adjunct professor of global health at the Catholic University in Rome and a senior consultant to Unit 8 in Geneva, a global health initiative that works with partners to bring out innovations to prevent, diagnose, and treat major diseases in low and middle income countries. I should maybe mention that we are recording this on May 17th, and you will be watching it quite a few days later. So things may have changed. We will be talking about some figures, which we hope will change. Of course, we hope that by the point in time you hear this, more people will be vaccinated. There will be more money distributed to vaccinations all around the globe. But we will address that whenever the point comes up. Mr. Barroso, let's start with you. Can you briefly line out the situation? What is it like at present in the global south and poorer countries? How are vaccinations progressing there?
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for your kind invitation and also for your words of introduction. We are not happy with the situation now as it is in terms of equity. There is, in fact, a problem of lack of equity globally. When we are speaking, we can say that around 1/3 of people in the wealthiest countries already got the first dose of vaccine, while that figure in the low-income countries is 0.2%. So a huge inequality. We believe there has been vaccine nationalism. We believe there have been bad behavior from some players, and I think we should do more to achieve our goal of vaccinating the world. Because as the topic of our conversation says, no one is safe until everyone is safe. And this is not just a slogan. First of all, it's a question of justice. It's a question of justice. Why should some, just because they are living in the right countries, have some kind of access to save their lives, while others have not the same access? But besides the problem of justice, that's in itself important, there is a problem of public health, of global public health. As we are seeing now, the more this pandemic continues, the more variants will exist. And the more variants exist, the more likely it will be to have new surges of the pandemic. So it's also in the interest of the richer countries to avoid this virus to continue circulating all over the world. So for all these reasons, we believe more has to be done. And what has to be done basically is to have a truly multilateral approach. This is why we have created COVAX, as you've mentioned. COVAX is an international facility that was created basically by Gavi, Global Alliance for Vaccines, organization that I have now the honor to chair its board, together with CEPI, it's another vaccine organization, and with World Health Organization, and also UNICEF. And what we are trying to do is precisely to reach all countries of the world. We have already reached 122 countries, so we are doing our job, but we are not distributing enough vaccines because they do not come to us. And why do they not come to us? Because there were problems of production, problems of distribution, there were and still are export restrictions, and also because some of the richer countries have accumulated many doses that they will not need. We estimate at around 1,500 billion doses that will not be used by the richer countries. So that's why we are asking those doses to be shared. And we hope there will be progress in the next days and weeks.
Thank you, Stefano Vella. From your point of view, what are the most important hurdles hindering a more equitable distribution of vaccines today?
I would follow what Mr. Barroso said. There is definitely a problem of production, but it's not the real and the only problem. There is a vaccine nationalism. As we said, we are accumulating vaccines in rich countries, and you remember I had a similar situation at the time of HIV/AIDS. Around the year 2000, in the rich countries, people living with HIV were alive and taking the drugs, and Africa was totally without. And then something happened that at the end we have been able to bring the drugs to Africa and other low middle income countries through mechanism of voluntary licensing and production by generics. So that was, for example, an example. The world took action, let me say. Now we have to do the same with vaccines for COVID-19. And as of today, we are not really happy because many countries do not have access. There are different reasons. In addition to production, we need to increase local production. There is also a problem of intellectual property rights, maybe, although I don't think it's the only problem we have, because you know that vaccines actually at the moment, the price, let's say, of the vaccines that we have, it's not big, mainly because of the contribution of the public sector to the production. So in a sense, it has been a kind of half-half risk sharing, and this put down the prices in a sense. But we need more vaccines. We need more producers. And what Barroso said, we will need new vaccines in a short time. We need to adjust the vaccines to the variants, and also maybe making them more easy to get, easier to administer. So we need innovation. Still, we need a lot of innovation.
Thank you. You've both mentioned a couple of factors. We can maybe look at them a little more closely now. Production, intellectual property rights, but also vaccine nationalism. I just wanted to pick up on something first that Stefano Vella said, Mr. Barroso. He said the price of vaccines is actually not that high. I think it's somewhere between $15 or even $30, $40 per dose. Would you say that if there was enough vaccine, it would be affordable to poorer countries from Gabi's perspective?
I agree that this time the real problem is not the price. There are other problems that were already mentioned, both by me and Professor Vella, is the supply problems in production. There were problems, technical problems in production in terms of bottlenecks, but also the issues of accumulation of vaccines in some parts of the world. But for instance, COVAX, we are buying vaccines at a lower price than the one you mentioned. Some of them we are buying a price of cost. One of the reasons why COVAX exists is exactly because of that, because we make what we call advanced market commitments, AMC. So it means we guarantee to the suppliers of vaccines that they will have enough to sell. And of course, we can get a much, much better price. So they sell us the vaccines at a price that is some 3, 4, 5 times less than the market in concrete vaccines. So this is precisely the idea behind Gavi that has been working for more than 20 years now, vaccinating more than 820 million children all over the world in the traditional diseases that require immunization, the so-called routine immunization. This is precisely why we were so successful in bringing down the price of vaccines. It's not the market just working. It is huge commitments taken by Gavi, where we have governments represented, but also some philanthropies and other donors, and we guarantee some kind of a price. It's a very interesting construct, by the way, public-private partnership. So the points now are not so much about price, while there are also some issues of price. There are some vaccines that are more expensive than others. What we need is to, from a public point of view, for instance, coming to COVAX, we have already mobilized very important resources, but we are now trying to mobilize, we already mobilized $6.6 billion US dollars for this year, but we need still $1.7 billion US dollars. In fact, I will co-host with the Prime Minister of Japan a pledging conference on the 2nd of June. I already organized together with the United States Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, what we call the investment opportunity, where some pledges were made, but we need to complete that by the 2nd of June. In that case, with this money, we'll be able to vaccinate around 30% of the world population, namely the so-called AMC countries, that are the developing countries. So we have 92 countries to which we'd like to reach at least 1.8 billion doses. That will allow them to protect at least the doctors, the nurses, the frontline workers, and also some more vulnerable people. It will be a contribution. It does not mean to vaccinate all the world, but it's an important part. So I believe we are going to reach that target. I believe we will have, from COVAX point of view, enough money to meet the targets we have set for this year.
So the focus of the public debate in recent weeks was mostly on the question of patent waivers. Of course, one important factor was that the Biden administration has announced to support a proposal at the World Trade Organization to waive patents in the TRIPS agreement. Stefano Vella, you said it is one factor, but not the most important one. Could you elaborate a little on that? Why do you think that wouldn't make a difference or much of a difference?
No, first of all, I think that the case of giving a waiver for patents is already in the TRIPS. I was in Doha at that. I was the president of the International AIDS Society in the year 2000. So we did a conference in Durban with Mandela. And then the next year we went to the UN, and then the Global Fund was set. And then also in Doha, there's been a declaration from the WTO saying that in case of extreme difficulty of the world's health, patents could be, in a sense, I'm not saying just temporarily, but the system could be changed. And in fact, we have been able to have voluntary licensing from the pharmaceuticals to the generic producers. And in fact, some of the prices went down like 1,000 times. So that's an old example. But for today, first of all, we need to explain that a vaccine doesn't have just one patent. There are like 120 processes. All of them are patented. It's like a car. It's not just one Mercedes patent. You have the brakes, you have the transmission, and then all these pieces are patented. So what I would suggest and also encourage, this is what I think the Biden administration did. It was a strong encouragement to give, in a sense, to the technology transfer. What we need is technology transfer. It's not taking out the patents. Is the technology transfer for others to produce the vaccines. Of course, we were not prepared. For example, in Italy, we are now starting to think of it, but we don't have a big, huge vaccine production facility. And this is true for other countries. For example, a paper we are working on for the T20 is exactly for this, is, for example, expanding production also in Africa. This may be useful also for other vaccines, so not just for the COVID vaccine. So I think that technology transfer is the key word. But of course, it should be pushed, let me say, very nicely, but pushed. Of course, we need some innovation from those that are producing the vaccine, and think that some of the vaccines that are produced in the world and already available here and there are actually produced by the governments themselves. So it's not only the pharmaceutical industry. In some countries, the governments put the money, in China, for example, and produce their own vaccines. So that's a public production of vaccines. And what Barroso said is true. I think I see the future as a public-private reconsideration of this word, because this is a word we used. You remember Barroso also had the commission. It should now become a reality, not just a word. Public-private means that both the public and the private work together. They risk together. So at the end, the product, the vaccine or any other health product, is of both parties.
So what Moderna did, for example, laying out its patents, is not helping enhancing the production.
That's a good example, as was said just now. The critical issue is know-how and technology, transfer of technology. Of course, we welcome, at least I welcome, the announcement made by the United States administration to consider the temporary waiver of patents. In fact, already last year, in May 2020, I co-signed with the former head prime ministers or president of the Republic. I co-signed an appeal in that direction. So together with Felipe González from Spain, Fernando Henrique Cardoso from Brazil, with Helen Clark from New Zealand, Joaquim Chissano from Mozambique, Mario Monti from Italy, and others, we have made an appeal. It was already last year in May 2020 for a temporary targeted waiver of vaccines patents. So I welcome. But let's be honest, this is not going to solve the problem. Because as you mentioned now, Anna, there was at least one important company that said we are not going to enforce the patents. If anyone wants to do it, can do it. But the reality is, until now, no one has done it. Why? Because intellectual property waiver is like, for instance, now I give you a manual of how to pilot the biggest plane in the world. But even if I give you for free the manual, the handbook, you are not going to do it because you don't know how to do it. So much better is to work with the companies and to help them transfer the technology to other places. And in fact, some already have done it and are quite successful. Some of this production is already in India. India is the biggest producer of vaccines in the world. Brazil produces vaccines as well. There are some contracts licensing the intellectual property, but not only the intellectual property, because vaccine is different from a normal, let's say, medicine. I usually say vaccine is not a product, it's a process. It's a very complex process that is very much dependent on supply chains. Some of those vaccines, the ingredients, different products they need, come from more than 40 countries. And so it is. It's very important not only to find the formula of the clinical formula of the vaccine, but the control, quality control, and homogeneity. We have found that. We have found by the World Health Organization some of the delays in authorization of vaccines are due to the fact that they found that the quality of the vaccines produced by the same company was not the same in the same country. So it's an extremely complex problem. So that's why, of course, we welcome all kind of transfer of property, intellectual property, but it's more important, or at least as important than that, to follow that with real transfer of technology. And by the way, I know that the European Union is working on that. European Union is working on supporting more manufacturing capabilities in Africa, for instance. There are already some cases of manufacturing in Africa of vaccines. So it could be possible, but let's be honest, it's not like that we are going now to solve this pandemic. It will take more time. Some of these issues take time, and that's why I'm saying, yes, let's look at that. But if you really want to help now, what we have to do is to share the vaccine doses, is to end the export restrictions, is to produce more, and is, of course, to find additional money and resources to buy more vaccines, if we want to solve the issue now. In a more medium term, yes, we can look and we should look. In fact, we are already looking at it, how to increase, let's say, the manufacturing capability all over the world.
I would like to ask you, as a former Commission President, how do you see the political likeliness of this happening now, of really fundamental progress in the EU and the Americans, for example, negotiating dropping export bans?
I don't know, frankly. I think there are in European countries, they are divided on that. There was, to be very open with you, there was some surprise on this announcement of the United States, because the United States have been until now, probably with the British and some others in Europe, those were more against the idea of IP waiver. So they changed completely, and there was no previous consultation with the European Union. And so that explains why some governments in Europe were, in fact, surprised with this, and they think there should have been some kind of consultation. So that's why in Porto, in the recent Porto summit, as you have noted, there was not a unanimous position of the European Union. Having said that, I believe that, of course, if the United States put a concrete proposal on the table in WTO, they will consider it seriously, yes. And there will be hopefully there will be some progress on that matter. What I'm saying, and I think it's prudent to say it, is that we should not now be distracted by this and not working on the other areas where we are going to have, hopefully, quicker results, okay? And we should not reduce the issue of patent waiver. We should look at the more complete issue of technology and know-how transfer.
We have only 5 minutes left, so let's maybe look ahead at the time after the pandemic. Stefano Vella, you have mentioned that vaccine production should be more a public-private issue. How could those cooperations concretely look like? What would you imagine as a system for the next pandemic that will probably hit us sometime in the future?
First of all, I couldn't agree more with President Barroso on what he said. We need to act now. The future is another thing, and actually we need to be prepared, because I was reading the IPPR report that came out a few days ago. It will be presented at the World Health Assembly shortly, but it's very, very straight. First of all, he said the mistakes we did, and collectively, we have been taken unprepared. So let's because this pandemic could have been anticipated because it happened before. So this is what the report says. So spillovers happened since years. Now, the future. The future is what they say. In fact, be prepared means also increase production and transfer technology. This is the main scope. Of course, if this doesn't happen, they say, of course we can rethink at a waiver, but at patent waiver. But it's not the point. As Barroso said, we need producing a vaccine is a process, is not a product. We did the same with the antiretrovirals, but these were chemicals. Now we have a process, which is not just the vial. Is a long process, and it's based also on raw material. The raw materials are coming from 40 countries. So you can imagine what it means to have these raw materials on hand for production sites. So I would really thanks President Barroso for what he said. I think that the US move was, in a sense, I took it as a kind of encouragement to behave well. That's it. Please behave. If not, etc. So this is my position. Let's work together. You know that Italy is a great supporter of Gavi. I know. Italy supported Gavi since the beginning, and I personally work for Unitaid. That actually also does some important technology transfer for other diseases. We need also to take the opportunity to think at other inequalities in health. It's not just so in a sense, just take this opportunity to think that inequalities in access to care, not only to vaccines, is everywhere in low middle income countries. So it's not only this. We need to have a global view for the future, for the health of humanity.
If I may comment on this, I believe it's really important what was said now by Professor Weller, that we were not prepared for this pandemic. And it's interesting because some of the richest countries in the world, more powerful countries in the world, were some of those who had more people dying. So it is, and it's amazing because when the different governments, they project the risks, it comes always, there is terrorist attacks, nuclear attacks, and pandemics. But we found that our governments in rich or not rich countries, they were not ready. So I hope now that people draw honest lessons from this. And I believe that's an opportunity from that point of view. Everybody now speaks about resilience. And that's the right word, resilience of our societies. And to look seriously at the issues of public health as a global public good, because no one is safe until everyone is safe. So, in fact, we need to do that. We have different political regimes and ideologies between, let's say, the United States, China, or Europe, but we need to be together on this, okay? Global public goods. And I think also in Europe, you are making some progress, because the reality is, and now if I may speak about my own experience, that until recently, the governments were not at all in favor of giving more powers to the European Commission, because we have not a European health service, we have national health services. And I agree with that. We should not have a European health service, but there are some areas that we should work together. For instance, only now we are creating a budget for public health in Europe terms. So I think now because of this pandemic, people are thinking more about their health and also the quality of their relations with the environment. That's why the issue of climate change is also important. So to look at these matters holistically, vaccines, of course, now it's an urgent matter. I'm saying that vaccination policy now is the most effective economic policy, because that's what allows us, the economy, to come back to normal and to grow and to create jobs. Vaccines, yes, but it's more than that. It's the resilience of our health systems, because in some of those countries, in Africa, I know them very well. Many years I've been working development issues when I was in my national capacity, and they need that support. And it's an opportunity for the world now to get serious. And hopefully that's why the G20 also is important, and to look at holistically at those challenges of public health and the resilience of our society, the relation of men and women, of course, with the environment and the threats that are out there.
Get serious, says Mr. Barroso, and I think this very passionate plaidoyer is a good way to end this session. Thank you very much, Stefano Vella. Thank you very much, Mr. Barroso, for your time.
Thank you to you.
Goodbye.
It was a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.